In a small village, a cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish. Akaz Marcus Chen stood perfectly still in the dim blue light of the Nexar tomb chamber, his weathered hands resting on the ceremonial staff that marked his position as guardian of the sacred rest. For 12 years, he had maintained this vigil over the ancient burial sites of Kepler 442b, watching over the remains of beings who had died long before humans ever looked up at the stars. The tomb stretched endlessly into the darkness beyond his vision, filled with crystalline sarcophagi that hummed with an energy older than Earth civilization. Each crystal coffin held the remains of a Nexari noble, their bodies preserved in a state that defied human understanding of death and decay. The walls themselves seemed alive, covered in shifting patterns that told stories in a language that took human scholars decades to partially decode. Marcus had learned to read some of those stories during his long watches. Tales of honor, sacrifice, and love that transcended species barriers. The Nexari had been gone for over 3,000 years, but their culture demanded that their resting places be guarded by those who understood the weight of eternal duty. Somehow humans had proven uniquely suited for this task. Other species in the Galactic Federation had tried to serve as tomb guardians. The Zephyrians were too curious, constantly trying to study and catalog everything. The Morphic Collective couldn't maintain individual focus for the required periods. The Stellar Hegemony considered the job beneath their status. But humans? Humans understood the concept of standing watch over the dead, of honoring those who came before even when no one was looking. The pay was modest, but Marcus had never taken this job for money. He had been a soldier once, fighting in the border wars against the Void Seekers. When that conflict ended, he found himself struggling to find purpose in civilian life. The Tomb Guardian program gave him something his military service had provided, a mission that mattered, a duty that went beyond himself. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, and Marcus turned toward the entrance tunnel. Visitors were rare, especially at this hour of the station's night cycle. Most people found the tombs unsettling, even with the environmental controls that made the atmosphere breathable for a dozen different species. Senator Vextai Murdoch emerged from the tunnel, his expensive robes rustling against the crystalline walls. The Altarian politician was one of the wealthiest beings in the Federation, having built his fortune through what he called development opportunities on frontier worlds. His pale blue skin gleamed in the tomb's light, and his 4 eyes moved independently as they took in the chamber's layout. Behind the senator walked 2 humans in business suits, their expressions carefully neutral. Marcus recognized the type immediately: corporate lawyers, the kind who could find loopholes in sacred texts and profit margins in prayers for the dead. Guardian Chen. Senator Murdoch's voice carried the artificial warmth of someone used to buying cooperation with charm. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us during your shift. Marcus hadn't agreed to anything. The senator had simply announced he was coming, citing his position on the Federation's Cultural Preservation Committee as authority to inspect the facility. Technically, Murdoch did have that right, but something about the visit felt wrong. Senator, Marcus replied with the minimum courtesy required. How can I assist you? Murdoch gestured broadly at the surrounding tombs. I've been reviewing the cultural preservation budget, and I must say, the expense of maintaining these facilities is quite substantial. The Federation spends nearly 2 billion credits annually on Tomb Guardian programs across 37 worlds. One of the lawyers stepped forward, a thin woman with sharp features. We're conducting an efficiency review to determine if these resources might be better allocated to living Federation citizens. Housing, education, medical research, surely these take priority over, well, this. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had heard variations of this argument before, usually from politicians looking for budget cuts to fund their pet projects. But something about the way the lawyer spoke, the way she dismissed 3 millennia of Nexari culture as this, set his teeth on edge. The Nexari joined the Federation voluntarily, Marcus said carefully. Their membership agreement specifically guaranteed the protection of their cultural sites in perpetuity. The Tomb Guardian program is part of that commitment. Senator Murdoch's smile widened, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. Agreements can be renegotiated, especially when circumstances change. The Nexari have been extinct for 3,000 years. They can hardly object to modifications that serve the greater good. The second lawyer, A nervous-looking man who kept checking his tablet cleared his throat. We've also noted some irregularities in the mineral surveys of this area. It seems the geological reports from when this site was designated as a cultural preserve may have been incomplete. Marcus's blood went cold. Mineral surveys meant mining interests. Mining interests meant someone wanted to strip mine the moon, tombs and all, for whatever valuable resources lay beneath. These burial chambers are sacred sites, Marcus said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent years standing watch over the dead. They're protected under Federation law and treaty obligation. Laws change, Senator Murdoch replied, his charm finally slipping to reveal something calculating underneath. Treaties are renegotiated. Progress requires difficult choices. The senator moved closer to one of the crystal sarcophagi, his reflection multiplying in its faceted surface. Tell me, Guardian Chen, what exactly do you do here? Stand around for 12 hours at a time, watching over corpses that can't possibly care whether you're here or not. I guard the honored dead, Marcus replied simply. For 100,000 credits a year plus benefit, the female lawyer added, consulting her tablet. That's quite expensive security for empty tombs. Marcus had faced enemy fire, survived ship-to-ship combat, and stood watch in places where the darkness itself seemed hungry for living souls. But he had never felt the kind of cold anger that was building in his chest as he watched these three treat the Nexari tomb complex like a real estate opportunity. The Nexari trusted the Federation to protect their legacy, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fury building inside him. They trusted us to honor their dead. Senator Murdoch laughed, a sound that echoed unpleasantly off the crystal walls. Guardian Chen, I admire your dedication, truly. But sentiment doesn't build hospitals or fund research stations. The Federation has responsibilities to the living. As the three visitors continued their inspection, making notes and taking measurements, Marcus stood silent watch. But inside, he was already planning. He thought about his service record, his clean personnel file, and the modest savings account that represented 12 years of faithful service. He thought about the stories written on the tomb walls, tales of honor that transcended death itself, and he thought about a phrase his old commanding officer used to say, sometimes you have to decide what you're willing to lose everything to protect. By the time Senator Murdoch and his lawyers left the tomb, Marcus Chen had made his decision. The dead deserved better advocates than politicians counting credits and corporate lawyers measuring profit margins. They deserved someone willing to fight for them, even against impossible odds. He bed and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all three wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers content and purring in the sun. 3 weeks after Senator Murdoch's visit, Marcus Chen walked through the gleaming corridors of New Geneva Station's legal district, a data pad clutched in his weathered hands. The space station orbited Earth's moon, serving as the Federation's primary judicial center where beings from across the galaxy came to settle disputes under interstellar law. The legal filing in Marcus's possession represented every credit he had saved during his 12 years of service, plus a loan that would take him decades to repay. But as he'd stood in the tomb chambers night after night, watching the ancient, crystal sarcophagi pulse with their eternal light, he knew he had no choice. The law firm of Castellanos, Okafor and Associates specialized in Federation civil rights cases, though they typically represented entire planetary populations or major corporations. Their willingness to take on a single Tomb Guardian's case against one of the most powerful politicians in the Federation had surprised Marcus until he met the lead attorney. Elena Castellanos was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much injustice to be impressed by wealth or political power. Her grandmother had been one of the first human lawyers to argue cases before the Galactic Court of Justice, establishing precedents that still protected species rights across the Federation. The filing has been accepted, Elena announced as Marcus entered her office, which offered a stunning view of Earth hanging blue and white in the cosmic darkness. As of this morning, Senator Vextai Murdoch is officially a defendant in Chenveer. Murdoch, case number 2387 GCJ 455. Marcus sank into the chair across from her desk, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. There was no going back now. Within hours, news feeds across the Federation would be buzzing with the unprecedented story of a Tomb Guardian suing a senator for 100 million credits. The senator's legal team has already requested an emergency dismissal hearing, Elena continued, scrolling through messages on her tablet. They're claiming the case lacks standing and that tomb guardians have no legal authority to file suits on behalf of deceased beings. But the Nexari Membership Treaty grants the Federation responsibility for protecting their cultural sites, yes. But Murdoch's lawyers are arguing that individual guardians are just employees, not legal representatives of Nexari interests. Elena looked up from her tablet. They're also claiming that your accusations constitute defamation against a sitting Federation senator. Marcus had expected this. The lawsuit accused Senator Murdoch of conspiracy to violate interstellar treaty obligations, attempting to defraud the Federation's Cultural Preservation Trust, and what Elena called grave desecration with intent to profit. The damages sought weren't just punitive, they represented the estimated value of the mineral deposits beneath the Nexari tombs. How did you know about the mining surveys? Elena asked, leaning back in her chair. Marcus had wondered if she would ask. The truth was complicated, involving late-night conversations with other tomb guardians, shared intelligence from a network of humans who had quietly dedicated their lives to protecting alien burial sites across the galaxy. The Federation employed nearly 10,000 human tomb guardians, and they talked to each other. Guardian Sarah Okonkwo on Tau Ceti Prime noticed survey ships in restricted zones near the Altarian burial caverns, Marcus explained. Guardian James Running Bear on New Phoenix reported corporate legal teams asking questions about mineral rights versus cultural preservation laws. When I mentioned Senator Murdoch's visit, the patterns started connecting. Elena nodded grimly. A systematic operation. That actually strengthens our case. If we can prove this isn't an isolated incident but part of a broader conspiracy to circumvent Federation cultural protection laws. Her tablet chimed with an incoming priority message. As she read, her expression darkened. What is it? Marcus asked. Senator Murdoch is calling a press conference this afternoon. His office says he'll be addressing recent frivolous legal actions filed by disgruntled Federation employees. Elena set down her tablet. Marcus, I need you to understand what you're walking into. Murdoch has resources we can't match. His legal team includes some of the most expensive lawyers in the Federation. His political allies control committee funding for cultural preservation programs. Marcus thought about the crystal sarcophagi, their eternal vigil in the darkness of the tomb chambers. The Nexari wrote on their tomb walls about a concept they called Keth Nara. It roughly translates to the duty that outlasts death. They believed some obligations transcend individual survival. That's beautiful, Elena said softly, but poetry doesn't win court cases. No, Marcus agreed. But evidence does, and I have something Senator Murdoch doesn't know about. Elena raised an eyebrow. Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew. A small recording device, standard issue for all tomb guardians. Federation regulations required them to document any unusual activities or security incidents during their shifts. 3 nights after the senator's visit, I recorded this conversation between 2 of his security staff, Marcus said, activating the device. The voices that emerged were distinctly human, speaking in low tones that suggested they thought they were alone. Mineral extraction rights will be worth 50 times what we pay in bribes to the Cultural Committee. Have to make sure the Guardian rotation schedules get modified. Don't want any of them filing incident reports when the survey teams start their deep scans. Senator says once the site gets reclassified from Cultural Preserve to Development Zone, we'll have 6 months to strip everything valuable before anyone notices. Elena's eyes widened as the recording continued. The security staff discussed payoffs to Federation officials, plans to falsify geological surveys, and a timeline for removing obstacles to the mining operation. When they mentioned specific tomb guardian shifts being adjusted to prevent witnesses, Marcus felt his blood run cold. When did you make this recording? Elena asked. 4 days ago. They were conducting what they called a final security assessment of the tomb complex. Marcus met her gaze. They talked about other sites too. Guardian positions being eliminated, tomb complexes being reclassified, entire cultural preserves being opened for resource extraction. Elena was already moving, pulling up legal databases and precedent files. This changes everything. We're not just talking about one tomb complex anymore. If we can prove Senator Murdoch is orchestrating a systematic violation of Federation cultural protection laws across multiple worlds, her fingers flew across her tablet's interface. The Stellar Hegemony filed a formal complaint last month about unauthorized surveys near their ancestral shrine worlds. The Zephyrian Cultural Council has been protesting the sudden reclassification of 3 sacred sites as economically viable development zones. I thought these were isolated incidents, but if they're all connected. Marcus watched Elena work, her excitement building as the scope of the conspiracy became clear. But he felt a growing unease. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous this case became. Senator Murdoch wasn't just a corrupt politician skimming credits from cultural preservation budgets. He was apparently running a systematic operation to strip mine the sacred sites of a dozen different species. Elena, Marcus said quietly, if this is as big as we think it is, what happens to the Guardians who helped gather this evidence? What happens to the tomb sites while we're fighting this in court? Elena paused in her research, the implications settling over her like a cold shadow. I don't know, she admitted. But I know what happens if we don't fight. Every sacred site in the Federation becomes a potential mining operation. Every species that trusted the Federation to protect their cultural heritage gets betrayed for profit. Marcus nodded, thinking again about the Nexari concept of Kethnara. Some duties outlasted death itself. Some fights were worth having regardless of the odds. Then we fight, he said simply. Outside Elena's office windows, Earth continued its ancient rotation, but Marcus felt as though he was standing at the edge of an abyss. On one side lay everything he had known, his quiet life as a tomb guardian, his modest salary, his peaceful nights watching over the honored dead. On the other side lay a battle that could destroy his career, bankrupt him financially, and potentially put him in danger from people with resources he couldn't imagine. But in between lay the crystal sarcophagi of beings who had trusted humanity to guard their eternal rest. And that, Marcus realized, made the choice no choice at all. The news of the lawsuit spread across the Federation's communication networks like wildfire, reaching every corner of civilized space within hours. On distant frontier worlds and bustling trade stations, beings stopped their daily routines to watch the unprecedented spectacle of a human tomb guardian, challenging one of the most powerful politicians in galactic government. Dr. Amara Singh, director of the Federation's Tomb Guardian program, watched the coverage from her office on Kepler Station, while fielding an endless stream of calls from worried guardians, Federation officials and news agencies seeking comment. The elderly xenoarchaeologist had spent 40 years studying the burial customs of extinct civilizations, but she had never imagined her life's work would become the center of a political firestorm. The humans were never supposed to become the galaxy's gravekeepers, she told the documentary crew that had rushed to interview her. When the Federation first established the cultural preservation protocols, we assumed each species would guard their own dead. The camera followed her as she walked through the museum wing of Kepler Station, past displays honoring the burial traditions of dozens of extinct civilizations. Each exhibit told the story of a species that had entrusted their sacred sites to Federation protection before vanishing into the cosmic dark. The Nexari were the first to specifically request human guardians. Dr. Singh continued, stopping before a holographic display of Marcus Chen standing vigil in the crystal tomb chambers. Their final diplomatic message, transmitted just before their star went supernova, contained detailed instructions for the protection of their burial sites. They had studied our species for decades through cultural exchanges. The hologram shifted to show ancient Nexari texts, their flowing script translated into Federation standard. Dr. Singh read aloud, "The humans understand the weight of promises made to the dead. They possess what we call Kethnara, the duty that outlasts death. We entrust our eternal rest to those who will stand watch even when no one remembers why the watch began." Similar requests had followed from other dying civilizations. The crystalline Vorthak, facing extinction from a plague that turned their silicon-based bodies to dust, had specifically petitioned for human guardians to protect their song crystals. The oceanic depth swimmers whose world was consumed by its expanding sun had requested humans to guard the pressure tombs in their species' deepest trenches. It became clear that humans possessed something unique in the galaxy, Dr. Singh explained. Other species saw death as an ending, a completion. Humans see it as a transition that requires ongoing care and remembrance. The Federation had initially been puzzled by this trend. Psychological evaluations of human tomb guardians revealed patterns that distinguished them from their alien counterparts. Where other species eventually rationalized their duty as a job, humans maintained an emotional connection to their charges that transcended logic or financial compensation. Guardian Sarah Okonkwo, reached at her post on Tau Ceti Prime, explained it during her interview. "I've been guarding the Altarian burial caverns for 8 years. Every night I read the stories carved into their tomb walls. I know the names of their children, their hopes for the future, their fears about being forgotten. How do you walk away from that?" But not everyone appreciated humanity's unique relationship with the dead. Senator Vextai Murdoch had built his political career on what he called practical resource management, arguing that the Federation spent too much money on emotional attachments to extinct civilizations. The senator's background revealed a being driven by a particular kind of ambition. Born into poverty on Altair Prime, Murdoch had clawed his way to wealth through aggressive business practices that skirted the edges of Federation law. His early ventures involved buying up worthless worlds and finding ways to extract value from them, often through legal loopholes that circumvented environmental or cultural protection. Plus, Murdoch sees the galaxy as a resource extraction opportunity, explained political analyst Gentar Voss during a late-night news program. He's made billions by identifying undervalued assets that other investors overlook due to sentimental or legal constraints. The pattern was always the same. Murdoch would identify a cultural preservation site with valuable mineral deposits or strategic location advantages. His team of lawyers and corporate partners would then find ways to challenge the legal protections, usually by questioning the cultural significance or arguing for the economic needs of living Federation citizens. His political rise had been fueled by promises to redirect wasteful cultural spending toward practical infrastructure projects. Voters across the Federation responded to his message that their tax credits were being spent on dead alien museums instead of schools, hospitals, and defense systems. But Murdoch's true motivations went deeper than political ambition or even greed. Those who had worked closely with him described a being who seemed personally offended by the concept of permanent cultural preservation. He spoke often about the tyranny of the past and the need for each generation to make its own choices about resource allocation. He can't understand why anyone would choose to honor the dead over serving the living, said former aide Kira Chen, no relation to Marcus, who had resigned from Murdoch's staff 3 years earlier. He sees the Tomb Guardian program as a fundamental waste of sentient potential. This philosophical divide had turned the lawsuit into something larger than a legal dispute. Across the Federation, beings were choosing sides in a debate about the nature of civilization itself. Did advanced societies have obligations to honor the wishes of the extinct? Were cultural preservation laws a form of intergenerational justice, or were they obstacles to progress? The human response was almost universal. They stood with their tomb guardians. Messages of support flooded Federation communication networks from Earth, Mars, the Jupiter colonies, and human settlements across the galaxy. Many included donations to Marcus Chen's legal defense fund, small amounts that collectively grew into a substantial war chest. "This isn't about one tomb guardian or one corrupt senator," wrote Captain Maria Santos of the Earth Defense Force in a message that was shared millions of times across social networks. "This is about whether humanity will continue to be the galaxy's conscience, the species that remembers honor when everyone else has forgotten." Other species were more divided. The pragmatic Zephyrians, who valued efficiency above sentiment, initially supported Murdoch's position that resources should serve the living. But as evidence emerged of the systematic scope of his corruption, even they began to question whether the issue was really about resource allocation or simple greed. The stellar hegemony, proud to the point of arrogance, found themselves in the uncomfortable position of supporting a human against one of their traditional political allies. Their own sacred sites had been targeted by Murdoch's operation, making them reluctant participants in what they saw as a lesser species conflict. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen continued his nightly vigils in the Nixari tombs, though now under increased security as threats began arriving from anonymous sources. The crystal sarcophagi hummed with their eternal energy, oblivious to the political storm raging above them, but Marcus felt the weight of their trust more keenly than ever. During one particularly quiet night shift, he found himself studying a section of tomb wall he had never noticed before. The Nixari script was more elaborate here, clearly marking something of special significance. With the help of his translation program, Marcus slowly decoded the message. To those who stand watch in the darkness, know that your vigil gives meaning to our rest. In life we feared that death would bring forgetting. In death we have found that love transcends the silence. Guard well, faithful ones. Your loyalty echoes in the spaces between stars. Reading those words, Marcus understood that the lawsuit was about more than protecting burial sites or stopping corruption. It was about proving that some things, honor, loyalty, the promises made to the dead, were worth defending regardless of the cost. The ancient Nixari had been right about humans. They did understand Kethanara, the duty that outlasted death, and now, faced with forces that would reduce sacred sites to mining operations and eternal vigils to budget line items, humanity would have to prove that understanding was worth fighting for. Outside the tomb chambers, the legal battle was just beginning. But in the quiet darkness among the crystal sarcophagi, Marcus Chen stood watch as he had for 12 years, knowing that some duties transcended politics, profit, and even the fear of personal destruction. The dead were counting on the living to remember what honor meant. And humans, it seemed, were uniquely qualified for that terrible, beautiful responsibility. The Galactic Court of Justice on New Geneva Station had witnessed countless historic cases over its 2-century existence, but the proceedings of Chen versus Murdoch drew unprecedented attention from across the Federation. The massive courtroom, designed to accommodate dozens of different atmospheric requirements and gravity preferences, buzzed with tension as beings from hundreds of worlds gathered to witness what many considered a defining moment for galactic civilization. Chief Justice Kaltor Vex, a towering reptilian being from Sigma Draconis, whose species had served as neutral arbiters for over a millennium, called the court to order with a voice that resonated through multiple translation frequencies simultaneously. His forearms moved in ritual gestures as he outlined the scope of the case that would determine whether cultural preservation laws could withstand challenges from economic interests, and this court will hear arguments regarding allegations of systematic conspiracy to violate Federation cultural protection treaties, Justice Vex announced, his words carrying the weight of legal precedent that stretched back to the founding of galactic government. The plaintiff seeks damages of 100 million credits and injunctive relief to prevent further alleged violations. Marcus Chen sat at the plaintiff's table wearing his formal Tomb Guardian uniform, the midnight blue fabric marked with silver emblems representing the dozen extinct civilizations under Federation protection. He had chosen to wear the uniform despite Elena Castellanos' suggestion that civilian clothing might seem less confrontational to the judges. For Marcus, this case was inseparable from his duties as a guardian. The defendant's table told a different story entirely. Senator Vexitai Murdoch arrived with an entourage of 12 lawyers, 3 public relations specialists, and enough legal support staff to fill an entire section of the courtroom. His lead attorney, Thane Corporate Legal's senior partner Zaban Court, was legendary for dismantling environmental protection, cases and cultural preservation challenges. The Federation cannot allow individual employees to weaponize the legal system against elected officials, Court declared during his opening statement, his crystalline voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a high-profile case. Guardian Chen's accusations are not merely unfounded, they represent a dangerous precedent that would allow any disgruntled civil servant to destroy political careers through frivolous litigation. Elena Castellanos rose for the plaintiff's opening, her much smaller legal team facing an opponent with resources that dwarfed their own. But as she began to speak, the courtroom grew quiet with anticipation. Your Honors, this case is not about one Tomb Guardian's grievances against one senator. The evidence will show that Senator Murdoch orchestrated a systematic conspiracy to circumvent Federation law, violate sacred treaties with extinct civilizations, and personally profit from the desecration of protected burial sites across multiple worlds. She activated a holographic display showing a star map of the Federation with dozens of worlds highlighted in red. Each of these systems contains cultural preservation sites that have been targeted by the defendant's operation. The pattern of corruption extends from the Nexari tombs on Kepler 442b to the Vorthak Song crystal caverns on Rigel Prime, to the depth swimmer pressure tombs in the Centauri deep oceans. The judges leaned forward with interest as Elena presented the scope of the alleged conspiracy. Justice Vex's second-in-command, Judge Nyara Oken from the Philosophical Betazoid Collective, requested clarification on the timeline of events. The pattern began approximately 18 months ago, Elena explained, coinciding with Senator Murdoch's appointment to the Cultural Preservation Committee. His staff conducted what they called efficiency reviews of protection sites, but internal communications reveal these were actually mineral and resource assessments designed to identify the most profitable targets. She played Marcus's recording of the security staff discussing their plans, the voices echoing through the courtroom's translation systems in dozens of languages. The conversation about bribes, falsified surveys, and removing obstacles sent murmurs of shock through the gallery. Court immediately objected. This recording was obtained through illegal surveillance of my client's staff during their lawful duties. Guardian Chen had no authority to record conversations between Federation security personnel. Elena was ready for this challenge. Tomb guardians are required by Federation Regulation 847C to document any suspicious activities that might threaten the integrity of protected sites. Guardian Chen was performing his sworn duty when he documented evidence of criminal conspiracy. The legal arguments continued for hours, with both sides citing centuries of precedent regarding surveillance rights, cultural protection laws, and the boundaries of political immunity. But the real drama came when Elena called her first witness, Dr. Amara Singh, director of the Tomb Guardian program. Dr. Singh took the witness stand with the dignity of someone who had spent 4 decades studying the funeral customs of extinct civilizations. Under Elena's questioning, she methodically detailed the systematic nature of the attacks on protected sites. In the past 18 months, we have received unusual requests to modify Guardian rotation schedules at 37 different locations, Dr. Singh testified. In each case, the modifications would have removed experienced Guardians during periods when unauthorized survey teams were operating in the area. She presented communication logs showing coordination between Senator Murdoch's office and local Federation administrators at each affected site. The pattern was clear. Someone with significant political influence was manipulating Guardian assignments to create windows of opportunity for illegal activities. Court's cross-examination attempted to portray the scheduling changes as routine, administrative efficiency measures, but Dr. Singh's expertise in the program's operations made his arguments seem thin and desperate. Mr. Court, Dr. Singh said with academic precision, in 40 years of managing this program, I have never seen scheduling modifications that consistently removed the most experienced Guardians from sites that subsequently experienced equipment malfunctions in their security monitoring systems. The afternoon session brought more devastating testimony from Guardian Sarah Okonkwo, appearing via secure holographic link from her post on Tau Ceti Prime. She described watching unauthorized survey ships operating near the Altarian burial caverns during the period when her fellow Guardians had been mysteriously reassigned. The ships were conducting deep core mineral scans directly beneath the burial chambers, Okonkwo testified. When I filed my incident report, I was told it was a routine maintenance survey, authorized by the Cultural Preservation Committee. But no one could produce the actual authorization documents. Under Elena's questioning, Okonkwo revealed that similar incidents had occurred at Guardian posts across the galaxy, always during periods when the most experienced and vigilant Guardians had been temporarily reassigned. The prosecution's most powerful moment came when Elena presented financial records obtained through Federation information disclosure laws. The documents showed a complex web of corporate entities controlled by Senator Murdoch, all positioned to benefit from mineral extraction, rights on worlds currently designated as cultural preservation sites. These corporations were established within days of the Cultural Preservation Committee approving new site protection protocols, Elena explained to the court. The defendant created a business infrastructure designed to profit from the very sites his committee was supposed to protect. But court's defense team was not finished. They presented their own expert witnesses. Economists who argued that the Federation's cultural preservation spending was unsustainable, and legal scholars who claimed that treaties with extinct civilizations had no binding force on future generations. The fundamental question, court argued, is whether the living have any obligation to honor agreements made by the dead. Federation resources should serve Federation citizens, not preserve monuments to species that can no longer benefit from our protection. The argument struck at the heart of the legal and philosophical issues underlying the case. Did civilization have a duty to maintain promises made to those who could no longer enforce them? Were cultural preservation laws a form of justice, or were they obstacles to progress that benefited the living? As the day's proceedings concluded, Marcus felt the weight of representing more than just his own grievances. In the courtroom gallery, he could see other tomb guardians who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the trial. Their faces reflected the same determination he felt. This case would determine whether their life's work had meaning, or whether it would be sacrificed to political expediency and corporate greed. Outside the courthouse, news crews from a dozen worlds reported on the day's revelations. The systematic nature of the corruption allegations had shocked many beings who had initially dismissed the case as a personal dispute between a minor civil servant and a powerful politician. Elena Castellanos briefed Marcus as they walked through the station's corridors, past crowds of supporters and protesters who had gathered to follow the trial. "We've established the pattern and the scope," she said. "Tomorrow we present the most." The Galactic Court of Justice on New Geneva Station had witnessed countless historic cases over its 2-century existence. But the proceedings of Chen versus Murdoch drew unprecedented attention from across the Federation. The massive courtroom, designed to accommodate dozens of different atmospheric requirements and gravity preferences, buzzed with tension as beings from hundreds of worlds gathered to witness what many considered a defining moment for galactic civilization. Chief Justice Kaltor Vex, a towering reptilian being from Sigma Draconis whose species had served as neutral arbiters for over a millennium, called the court to order with a voice that resonated through multiple translation frequencies simultaneously. His forearms moved in ritual gestures as he outlined the scope of the case that would determine whether cultural preservation laws could withstand challenges from economic interests. This court will hear arguments regarding allegations of systematic conspiracy to violate Federation cultural protection treaties, Justice Vex announced, his words carrying the weight of legal precedent that stretched back to the founding of galactic government. The plaintiff seeks damages of 100 million credits and injunctive relief to prevent further alleged violations. Marcus Chen sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing his formal Tomb Guardian uniform, the midnight blue fabric marked with silver emblems representing the dozen extinct civilizations under Federation protection. He had chosen to wear the uniform despite Elena Castellanos' suggestion that civilian clothing might seem less confrontational to the judges. For Marcus, this case was inseparable from his duties as a guardian. The defendant's table told a different story entirely. Senator Vextai Murdoch arrived with an entourage of 12 lawyers, 3 public relations specialists, and enough legal support staff to fill an entire section of the courtroom. His lead attorney, Thane Corporate Legal's senior partner Zavin Court, was legendary for dismantling environmental protection cases and cultural preservation challenges. The Federation cannot allow individual employees to weaponize the legal system against elected officials, Court declared during his opening statement, his crystalline voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a high-profile case. Guardian Chen's accusations are not merely unfounded, they represent a dangerous precedent that would allow any disgruntled civil servant to destroy political careers through frivolous litigation. Elena Castellanos rose for the plaintiff's opening, her much smaller legal team facing an opponent with resources that dwarfed their own. But as she began to speak, the courtroom grew quiet with anticipation. Your Honors, this case is not about one Tomb Guardian's grievances against one senator. The evidence will show that Senator Murdoch orchestrated a systematic conspiracy to circumvent Federation law, violate sacred treaties with extinct civilizations, and personally profit from the desecration of protected burial sites across multiple worlds. She activated a holographic display showing a star map of the Federation, with dozens of worlds highlighted in red. Each of these systems contains cultural preservation sites that have been targeted by the defendant's operation. The pattern of corruption extends from the Nexari tombs on Kepler 442b to the Vorthak Song Crystal Caverns on Rigel Prime, to the depth swimmer pressure tombs in the Centauri deep oceans. The judges leaned forward with interest as Elena presented the scope of the alleged conspiracy. Justice Vex's second-in-command, Judge Nyara Oken from the Philosophical Betazoid Collective, requested clarification on the timeline of events. The pattern began approximately 18 months ago, Elena explained, coinciding with Senator Murdoch's appointment to the Cultural Preservation Committee. His staff conducted what they called efficiency reviews of protection sites, but internal communications revealed these were actually mineral and resource assessments designed to identify the most profitable targets, and she played Marcus's recording of the security staff discussing their plans, the voices echoing through the courtroom's translation systems in dozens of languages. The conversation about bribes, falsified surveys, and removing obstacles sent murmurs of shock through the gallery. Court immediately objected. This recording was obtained through illegal surveillance of my client's staff during their lawful duties. Guardian Chen had no authority to record conversations between Federation security personnel. Elena was ready for this challenge. Tomb guardians are required by Federation Regulation 847C to document any suspicious activities that might threaten the integrity of protected sites. Guardian Chen was performing his sworn duty when he documented evidence of criminal conspiracy. The legal arguments continued for hours, with both sides citing centuries of precedent regarding surveillance rights, cultural protection laws, and the boundaries of political immunity. But the real drama came when Elena called her first witness, Dr. Amara Singh, director of the Tomb Guardian program. Dr. Singh took the witness stand with the dignity of someone who had spent 4 decades studying the funeral customs of extinct civilizations. Under Elena's questioning, she methodically detailed the systematic nature of the attacks on protected sites. In the past 18 months, we have received unusual requests to modify Guardian rotation schedules at 37 different locations, Dr. Singh testified. In each case, the modifications would have removed experienced Guardians during periods when unauthorized survey teams were operating in the area. She presented communication logs showing coordination between Senator Murdoch's office and local Federation administrators at each affected site. The pattern was clear. Someone with significant political influence was manipulating Guardian assignments to create windows of opportunity for illegal activities. Court's cross-examination attempted to portray the scheduling changes as routine, administrative efficiency measures, but Dr. Singh's expertise in the program's operations made his arguments seem thin and desperate. Mr. Court, Dr. Singh said with academic precision, in 40 years of managing this program, I have never seen scheduling modifications that consistently removed the most experienced Guardians from sites that subsequently experienced equipment malfunctions in their security monitoring systems. The afternoon session brought more devastating testimony from Guardian Sarah Okonkwo, appearing via secure holographic link from her post on Tau Ceti Prime. She described watching unauthorized survey ships operating near the Altarian burial caverns during the period when her fellow Guardians had been mysteriously reassigned. The ships were conducting deep-core mineral scans directly beneath the burial chambers, Okonkwo testified. When I filed my incident report, I was told it was a routine maintenance survey authorized by the Cultural Preservation Committee. But no one could produce the actual authorization documents. Under Elena's questioning, Okonkwo revealed that similar incidents had occurred at Guardian posts across the galaxy, always during periods when the most experienced and vigilant Guardians had been temporarily reassigned. The prosecution's most powerful moment came when Elena presented financial records obtained through Federation information disclosure laws. The documents showed a complex web of corporate entities controlled by Senator Murdoch, all positioned to benefit from mineral extraction. Rights on worlds currently designated as cultural preservation sites. These corporations were established within days of the Cultural Preservation Committee approving new site protection protocols, Elena explained to the court. The defendant created a business infrastructure designed to profit from the very sites his committee was supposed to protect. But Court's defense team was not finished. They presented their own expert witnesses, economists who argued that the Federation's cultural preservation spending was unsustainable, and legal scholars who claimed that treaties with extinct civilizations had no binding force on future generations. The fundamental question, Court argued, is whether the living have any obligation to honor agreements made by the dead. Federation resources should serve Federation citizens, not preserve monuments to species that can no longer benefit from our protection. The argument struck at the heart of the legal and philosophical issues underlying the case. Did civilization have a duty to maintain promises made to those who could no longer enforce them? Were cultural preservation laws a form of justice, or were they obstacles to progress that benefited the living? As the day's proceedings concluded, Marcus felt the weight of representing more than just his own grievances. In the courtroom gallery, he could see other Toomgar. The second day of trial brought unexpected drama when Elena Castellanos announced Dians who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness the trial. Their faces reflected the same determination he felt. This case would determine whether their life's work had meaning, or whether it would be sacrificed to political expediency and corporate greed. Outside the courthouse, news crews from a dozen worlds reported on the day's revelations. The systematic nature of the corruption allegations had shocked many beings who had initially dismissed the case as a personal dispute between a minor civil servant and a powerful politician. Elena Castellanos briefed Marcus as they walked through the station's corridors, past crowds of supporters and protesters who had gathered to follow the trial. "We've established the pattern and the scope," she said. "Tomorrow we present." The third day of trial brought an atmosphere of electric tension to the Galactic Court of Justice. News crews from across the Federation had expanded their coverage, with special broadcasts interrupting regular programming to carry live feeds of what many were calling the most important cultural preservation case in galactic history. Marcus Chen arrived at the courthouse to find protesters and supporters filling the plaza outside. Beings from dozens of worlds had traveled to New Geneva Station to witness the proceedings, many carrying signs displaying the names of extinct civilizations whose burial sites had been targeted by Senator Murdoch's conspiracy. The most striking sight was a group of elderly humans wearing Tomb Guardian uniforms, veterans who had served at cultural preservation sites across the galaxy. They stood in silent vigil, their weathered faces reflecting decades of faithful service to the honored dead. Among them, Marcus recognized Guardian Commander Elena Vasquez, who had protected the Andromedian crystal forests for over 30 years. "We're here for all the Guardians who can't leave their posts," Commander Vasquez told him as they walked into the courthouse together, "and for all the civilizations who trusted us to remember them when no one else would." Inside the courtroom, Elena Castellanos prepared for what she knew would be the most crucial day of the trial. The prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence of the conspiracy, but the defense still had powerful arguments about political immunity and the supposed legality of Senator Murdoch's actions. Chief Justice Vex called the court to order, and Elena rose to call her final witness. "Your Honors, the prosecution calls Senator Vextai Murdoch." The courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs. Court immediately objected, arguing that his client had Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination under Federation law, but Justice Vex overruled him. "The defendant has made extensive public statements about this case," the Chief Justice declared. "He waived privilege when he chose to litigate these matters in the court of public opinion." Senator Murdoch took the witness stand with visible reluctance, his usual political confidence replaced by the careful wariness of someone who knew he was walking into a legal trap. Under Elena's methodical questioning, the facade of the principled politician began to crumble. "Senator Murdoch," Elena began, "you've testified before Federation committees that the Tomb Guardian program represents wasteful spending. Do you stand by that assessment?" "I believe Federation resources should serve the living, not preserve monuments to extinct species," Murdoch replied carefully. Elena activated a holographic display showing financial records. "According to these documents, your shell corporations have collectively invested over 50 million credits in mining equipment and extraction rights applications. Would you call that serving the living?" Court objected, but Elena pressed forward. "Senator, Did you or did you not establish Altair Mining Consortium specifically to bid on mineral rights for worlds currently designated as cultural preservation sites? Murdoch's answers became increasingly evasive as Elena walked him through the paper trail of his financial empire. Each shell corporation, each strategic investment, each carefully timed business decision pointed to a systematic plan to profit from the destruction of protected cultural sites. The most devastating moment came when Elena presented communication, logs from Murdoch's personal computer systems, recovered through Federation information disclosure laws. Senator, this is a message from your personal account to Rigel Mining Partners, dated 3 days before you introduced legislation to streamline cultural preservation reviews. You wrote, and I quote, "The Guardian problem will be solved within 6 months. Begin equipment acquisition for Phase 2 extraction operations." What did you mean by the Guardian problem? Murdoch's composure finally cracked. The Tomb Guardian program is inefficient, he snapped. These humans form emotional attachments to their assignments that interfere with rational resource allocation. They file complaints, leak information to media outlets, and generally obstruct legitimate Federation business. Elena seized on his admission. So when you refer to solving the Guardian problem, you mean eliminating the oversight that prevents you from illegally strip mining cultural preservation sites? I mean optimizing Federation resource utilization, Murdoch replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Elena's final line of questioning focused on the Nexari tomb specifically, forcing Murdoch to confront the ultimate consequences of his actions. Senator, you are aware that the Nexari specifically requested human guardians for their burial sites? Yes. And you are aware that Guardian Chen has faithfully protected those sites for 12 years? Yes. Yet your internal communications refer to plans to destroy the Nexari crystal chambers to access quantum crystal deposits beneath them. How do you reconcile that with the Federation's treaty obligations to protect Nexari cultural sites? Murdoch's answer revealed the cold calculation behind his entire operation. Treaties with extinct civilizations have no enforceable authority. The dead cannot file complaints or vote in elections. The living have needs that take priority over sentiment. The courtroom fell into shocked silence. Even some of Murdoch's own supporters seemed stunned by the callous dismissal of sacred obligations that formed the foundation of Federation cultural policy. Elena's closing argument built on that moment of revelation, painting a picture of a politician who had systematically betrayed the trust placed in the Federation by dying civilizations across the galaxy. Your Honors, Senator Murdoch has admitted under oath that he considers treaty obligations to extinct species to be meaningless. He has confessed to establishing financial structures designed to profit from the destruction of protected sites. He has acknowledged orchestrating the systematic intimidation of tomb guardians who stood in the way of his illegal activities. She gestured toward Marcus, sitting at the plaintiff's table in his tomb guardian uniform. Guardian Chen represents more than one man's dedication to duty. He represents the promise that the Federation made to the Nexari and dozens of other extinct civilizations, that their final resting places would be protected by beings who understood the sacred nature of that trust. Elena's voice carried the weight of moral authority as she continued. The defendant asks us to choose between serving the living and honoring the dead. But that choice is false. A civilization that breaks its promises to the extinct will inevitably betray the living as well. Trust once broken cannot be rebuilt through profit margins or political expediency. Court's closing argument attempted to portray his client as a visionary leader trying to reform an outdated system, but the evidence presented during the trial had made such arguments sound hollow and desperate. The Federation faces real challenges, Court argued. Border security, infrastructure development, medical research. All these needs require resources that are currently locked away in cultural preservation programs that benefit no one. Senator Murdoch had the courage to propose difficult but necessary reforms. But as he spoke, even Court seemed to realize that the jury of Federation judges had already reached their conclusions. The systematic nature of the conspiracy, the personal enrichment scheme, and Murdoch's own callous dismissal of treaty obligations had destroyed any claim to principled reform. Justice Vex called for a recess while the 3-judge panel deliberated, but their discussion lasted only 2 hours. When court reconvened, the Chief Justice's expression was grave as he prepared to deliver the verdict. In the matter of Chen versus Murdoch, this court finds that the defendant, Senator Vextai Murdoch, did knowingly and systematically violate Federation cultural preservation laws through a conspiracy designed to enrich himself and his associates at the expense of protected burial sites. The courtroom erupted as Justice Vex continued. The evidence presented clearly establishes a pattern of bribery, intimidation, and treaty violation that strikes at the heart of the Federation's commitment to cultural preservation. The defendant's own testimony confirms his contempt for the sacred obligations that bind our civilization to honor the wishes of extinct species. The damages awarded exceeded even Elena's ambitious request, 200 million credits in compensatory and punitive damages, plus injunctive relief requiring the immediate cessation of all mining-related activities near protected cultural sites. But the legal victory was only the beginning of the consequences for Senator Murdoch. Justice Vex announced that the court's findings would be forwarded to Federation prosecutors for criminal investigation, and that the Cultural Preservation Committee would be suspended pending a complete review of its operations. As the gavel fell and the courtroom began to empty, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. The crystal sarcophagi in the Nexari tombs would remain undisturbed, their eternal vigil protected by the legal precedent established in this courtroom. Outside the courthouse, the celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness justice being served, and their cheers echoed through the corridors of New Geneva Station. News crews broadcasted images of tomb guardians embracing their years of faithful service finally vindicated by galactic law. But for Marcus, the most meaningful moment came when Commander Vasquez approached him with tears in her eyes. "Guardian Chen," she said formally, then broke into a smile. "Marcus, you've honored every guardian who ever stood watch over the dead. You've proven that some things are worth fighting for, regardless of the cost." As the crowd celebrated around them, Marcus thought about the quiet tomb chambers where his fellow guardians continued their eternal vigil. The legal battle was over, but the deeper duty remained. Standing watch over the honored dead, remembering civilizations that had trusted humanity to preserve their final legacy. The victory in the courtroom was important, but the real triumph was the proof that some values, honor, loyalty, the sacred trust between the living and the dead 6 months after the verdict, Marcus Chen stood once again in the familiar blue glow of the Nexari tomb chambers. But everything had changed. The legal victory had sent shockwaves across the Federation, triggering investigations that eventually exposed corruption in over a dozen government departments and led to the largest cultural preservation reform in galactic history. The crystal sarcophagi hummed with their eternal energy, unchanged by the political upheaval that had raged above them. But Marcus felt their peace differently now, knowing that their rest was secure not just for his lifetime but for generations to come. The legal precedent established in Chen versus Murdoch had made cultural preservation laws virtually unassailable, creating protections that would outlast any individual guardian or politician. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Marcus turned to see Dr. Amara Singh approaching through the tomb's entrance tunnel. The elderly director of the Tomb Guardian program looked years younger than she had during the trial, her relief at the program's vindication evident in every step. "Guardian Chen," she said with genuine warmth, "I wanted to personally deliver some news that I think you'll find interesting." She activated a portable holographic display, showing a star map of Federation space. Dozens of worlds glowed with green indicators, marking cultural preservation sites that were now permanently protected under the new legislation passed in response to the trial's revelations. "The Federation Council has established the Chen Protection Protocol," Dr. Singh announced. "Every cultural preservation site in Federation space now has enhanced legal protections, expanded funding for Guardian programs, and most importantly, whistleblower protections for guardians who report suspicious activities." Marcus felt a deep satisfaction at the knowledge that his willingness to fight had created safeguards for every tomb guardian in the galaxy. No longer would they face the choice between their duty and their personal safety when confronting corruption. "There's more," Dr. Singh continued. "The Stellar Hegemony has formally requested human guardians for their most sacred sites. The Zephyrian Collective has established an exchange program to study human guardian techniques. Even the Betazoid philosophers want to understand what they call the human gift for remembering the dead." The recognition was gratifying, but Marcus understood that it represented something deeper than professional respect. The trial had proved that humans possessed something unique in the galaxy, an ability to form emotional bonds with duty itself, to find meaning in service that transcended personal benefit. Dr. Singh's expression grew more serious as she delivered the final piece of news. Senator Murdoch was sentenced yesterday. 25 years in Federation minimum security prison, forfeiture of all assets connected to the conspiracy, and permanent barring from any position in cultural affairs. His political career is over. Marcus nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor pity. Justice had been served, but the real victory was not Murdoch's punishment. It was the knowledge that the sacred sites would remain protected. After Dr. Singh left, Marcus resumed his watch among the crystal tombs. The routine was the same as it had been for 12 years, monitoring environmental controls, conducting security sweeps, maintaining the delicate balance that preserved the Nexari remains for eternity. But now his solitary vigil had become part of a larger story, one that had captured the imagination of beings across the galaxy. The lawsuit had triggered a renaissance in cultural preservation, with new funding for archaeological research, expanded protection for endangered species cultural sites, and most importantly, a renewed appreciation for the tomb guardians who stood watch over the galaxy's cultural heritage. Marcus had received thousands of messages from across the Federation, beings thanking him for his courage in standing up to corruption. Many were from other guardians who had faced similar pressures but hadn't known how to respond. Others came from ordinary citizens who had been inspired by the story of a single person willing to risk everything to honor the dead. But the message that meant the most to Marcus had come from an unexpected source: the Nexari themselves. During the months following the trial, xenoarchaeologists had made a remarkable discovery in the deepest chambers of the tomb complex. Hidden beneath layers of protective crystal, they had found a message chamber that contained what appeared to be the Nexari's final communication to the Federation. The translation had taken weeks to complete, but when the linguists finally decoded the ancient script, they discovered that the Nexari had somehow foreseen the challenges that would face their guardians. Their final message read like a prophecy, written specifically for Marcus and the trial that had vindicated their trust in humanity. To the faithful ones who will stand watch in the darkness, know that we chose you not for your strength or your wisdom, but for the fire that burns in your hearts when faced with dishonor. Others may see our tombs as obstacles to progress, but you will see them as sacred trusts. Others may count the cost of remembrance, but you will understand that some duties have no price. The time will come when those who serve the living will demand that you abandon the dead. In that hour, remember that you carry within you the essence of Kethnara, the duty that outlasts death itself. Stand firm, faithful guardians. The universe is watching to see whether honor survives when prophet calls. Reading those words in the quiet of the tomb chambers, Marcus felt the profound weight of the Nexari's trust. They had known somehow that their guardians would face exactly the challenge that Senator Murdoch had represented. And they had chosen humans because they understood that his species possessed the emotional strength to honor obligations that transcended immediate benefit. The legal victory had been important, but this message made clear that the real battle had been about something deeper. Whether civilization itself would choose honor over convenience, duty over profit, remembrance over forgetting. Elena Castellanos visited occasionally, bringing updates on the ongoing investigations sparked by the trial. Dozens of Federation officials had been indicted, corrupt corporations had been dissolved, and the entire system of cultural preservation oversight had been reformed. But more importantly, public opinion across the galaxy had shifted in favor of protecting cultural heritage sites. You've started something bigger than a lawsuit, Elena told Marcus during one of her visits. Beings across the Federation are demanding accountability from their leaders. They're asking whether their governments honor the promises made to extinct civilizations. You've reminded the galaxy that some things matter more than quarterly profit reports. The transformation extended beyond politics to culture itself. Universities across the Federation had established new programs in cultural preservation studies. Artists created works inspired by the Tomb Guardians' dedication. Children on dozens of worlds played games where they pretended to be guardians, protecting ancient treasures from corporate greed. Most significantly, Applications for the Tomb Guardian program had increased by over 300%, with beings from multiple species requesting training to serve alongside human guardians. The program that had once struggled for recognition and funding had become one of the most respected professions in the Federation. As Marcus completed his nightly rounds through the tomb chambers, he reflected on how profoundly his life had changed. He was no longer just a tomb guardian. He had become a symbol of the principle that some duties transcended personal safety or political pressure. Schools taught his story as an example of moral courage. Legal scholars studied the trial as a masterpiece of civil rights litigation. But in the quiet darkness among the crystal sarcophagi, Marcus remained what he had always been, a human being standing watch over the honored dead, fulfilling a promise made by his species to beings who could no longer speak for themselves. The victory in the courtroom had secured legal protections for cultural sites across the galaxy. The political reforms had eliminated the corruption that threatened sacred spaces. The cultural renaissance had renewed appreciation for the Guardian's work. Yet the most important victory was the simplest one: proof that some things, honor, loyalty, the sacred trust between the living and the dead, could not be bought, intimidated, or legislated away. Humans had been chosen as guardians because could not be bought, intimidated, or legislated away. In the darkness of space above them, the Nexari tombs continued their ancient hum, guarded by humans who understood that some duties transcended politics, profit, and even personal safety. The dead were sleeping peacefully, watched over by the living who had proven worthy of their trust. And in the end, that was the only verdict that truly mattered.